Mike Florio shockingly defended Lamar Jackson as the MVP media haters admitted their mistakes following Baltimore's dominant win over the Houston Texans. We talk about that, Lamar Jackson snatching the MVP, a Ravens-Texans recap, and so much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe there as well. It's the same show, both in audio and video. So whether you want to watch or listen, you're not missing out on any of our content. Speaking of which, we are a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast. So whether it's Ravens news, analysis, updates, so much more, we have you covered there. We go live after every single Ravens game. We had a blast yesterday after the Ravens beat down on the Houston Texans. We have bonus content. So if you want the Ravens coverage, be sure to keep it locked in here on Locked On Ravens. Today's edition of Locked On Ravens here on Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Usually here on the Locked On Podcast Network, it's Crossover Thursday during the season where we dive into biggest storylines, keys to victory for the game. Well, we don't have to do all that because it's Victory Thursday for the Ravens. We had a Victory Sunday for Baltimore last week after the Ravens beat the Steelers, and now the Ravens, they end their 3 games in 11-day stretch, outscoring their opponents 100-33, all capped off by this 31-2 win over the Houston Texans. So much to dive into today, starting off with look at how far we've come for Mike Florio, or Mike Flores, as Lamar Jackson called him during last Christmas. Or just a year later, Lamar Jackson is getting defended by Mike Florio on social media and the Ravens as well. So we'll talk about what Mike Florio had to say, and then we'll move into Lamar's MVP media haters admitting their mistakes. It feels so good. It feels so good because Lamar definitely snatched the MVP. We'll talk about that. Plus Lamar's teammates actually coming to his defense and declaring the race over themselves. Then finally, of course, we have to get into a bit of a Ravens-Texans recap because there was a game that happened, and yes, an MVP, in my opinion, was taken right there. But we also have to talk about the defense. Zach Orr shutting out the Texans and a lot more there as well. So let's start off with Mike Florio. And the reason I wanted to do it Florio in particular is because of what happened last Christmas, where he was all on the, if the Ravens and 49ers play in the Super Bowl, 49ers are going to beat them down. That's going to be a boring Super Bowl, yada, yada, yada. And really was coming at the Ravens, coming at Lamar Jackson. And just a year later, Mike Florio is putting out multiple posts on Twitter and is defending Lamar, saying Lamar MVP with a gif of Lamar. And honestly, in terms of the Ravens, he said that when the Ravens are clicking, there's no better team in the league. And I think that a lot of people feel at least some level of that way with the Ravens, to where when they are clicking, when they have everything going, that they are one of the best, if not the best teams in the league. And we certainly saw that on Wednesday. But this is just like a really, I don't even know what to call it, weird, fulfilling, I don't know what, but this is the Lamar discourse from Mike Florio. I think a lot of people have been almost, I don't know if they've been waiting for it, but it feels good to have him at least say, hey, not making up any other narrative, not saying this. There have been a lot of conversations about the MVP award. And again, my stance on the MVP award stays the same, where it is clearly not the most important thing here for the Ravens. That obviously is winning the Super Bowl. But if the guy deserves the MVP, the guy deserves the MVP. And you look at all the stats behind it. You look at Lamar Jackson, still just barely behind Aaron Rodgers, is one of the best passer rating seasons in NFL history. He's number 2. All of it backs it up for Lamar. And it's not that Josh Allen isn't having an incredible year this year. He is. This was never about, let's just make it out like Josh Allen's having this terrible year. He's not. Because guess what? Lamar has had good games and Josh Allen has had good games. Lamar's had bad games and Josh Allen has had bad games. But it's a matter of context with a lot of these things. And so when we talk about, an MVP race being declared over with like 4 weeks to go in the season, that's like a whole month of football left, essentially. 3 weeks, that's a lot of football. But when Lamar does this in the second to last game of the season on national TV, and like that's what it is, right? Where Lamar in front of everybody. These were MVP moments from Lamar Jackson throughout the entire game. Mark Andrews on that play where Lamar was, scrambling around. He then makes Danielle Hunter look wildly ineffective when Danielle Hunter is an incredible player. He's an all-pro player. Lamar makes him look silly out there on that play to Isaiah Likely. It's those types of moments, the rushing touchdown and him just continuing to put up really solid numbers. Again, he goes in the game 10 of 15, 168 passing yards. Those numbers don't wow you. But like we talked about last year, it's the efficiency factor of Lamar. And there have been all these conversations about Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Oh, wow. Well, the reason the Ravens are so good and the reason Lamar is so good is because Derrick Henry is the one that's making Lamar better. This is a two-way street, everybody. Like, let's be honest about this. And I've been saying this because this is not the first time, and maybe we'll hear it again. I don't know. Hopefully not. But it's like, Lamar makes Derrick Henry better. Derrick Henry makes Lamar better. Yes, it's a two-way street. Derrick Henry goes 27 for 147 in this game. That's a product of teams being scared of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry being good. That's what it is. Lamar has his numbers. It's a product of Lamar Jackson being good, and then defenses having to worry about Derrick Henry. That's why you bring a guy like Derrick Henry in. But to see Mike Florio defend Lamar Jackson, saying it's Lamar, and again, this is a guy that has a vote, right? This is a guy, when it's coming from a voter in particular, because, we can have these conversations and say, oh, how are these guys going to vote? We can guess, we can try to analyze how it's going to go, but this is coming straight from a voter, someone who, and you talk about others as well who have votes, and they make it very clear sometimes whether, they're voting for this guy, whether they're voting for that guy. But this was like, again, Mike Florio just went on like a tweet blitz defending Lamar, saying, hey, this is the MVP. This is the MVP. And that, to me, from where we were last season this time, and by the way, Mike Florio got absolutely dunked on by Adam Schefter earlier in the day. So it's just like, man, what a day. Mike Florio in the headlines multiple times on Christmas. Not the first time we've seen that like last year, but it was cool. It was cool to see that. So again, this energy has to be kept up, right? I mean, Mike Florio obviously can't say all this about Lamar and then go on and say something else on a different platform about, maybe it's still Josh Allen. Mike Florio has planted his flag. That's what it is. Guys, here's the thing. You can plant your flag and you can unplant your flag, okay, on anything. But this essentially, to me, is you're saying Lamar's the MVP. You see what's happening on your TV. You see what's happening in the stadium. We're witnessing greatness here, one of one. And I think part of this reason that a lot of people flipped on Lamar Jackson in this game is not just the MVP moments that happened. That certainly is a reason, and we'll get to this in a couple minutes in the second part of the show. But it's also more so about, he also broke Michael Vick's quarterback rushing record in this game. And that's in front of a national audience on Christmas, high-powered game. And again, the game was dominated by the Ravens. It was a complete effort led by Lamar Jackson, led by the defense, led by Derrick Henry. This is a group effort. But again, none of this happens without Lamar. Just like in Buffalo, not a lot would happen without Josh Allen. In Kansas City, not a lot would happen without Patrick Mahomes. That's where the conversation about MVPs come in. But those guys also have great players on their teams. So when you want to use that conversation about Lamar, that energy has to be kept for some of those guys as well. And it's not. That's the problem. So, I mean, this was a statement game from Lamar Jackson. And we saw this last Christmas where Lamar wrapped up the MVP in front of a national audience on a day where everybody was watching. Everybody was watching. Where, for example, with Josh Allen, the NFL flexed him into that primetime slot, that 4:00 window last week against the Patriots, and he put up a stinker game. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson against the Steelers was going out there and dominating. And now the Ravens, with their big wins coming out of their bye week, Pittsburgh's losses, they now control their AFC North destiny. So I know a lot of people were also using the number 5 seed or the Ravens being a wild card against them. That to me is, oh, well, now it's the 3 versus 2 seed. Or now it's a little different there. So, I mean, Mike Florio's headline in his article was Beyonce put on the best show in Houston on Christmas, but the Ravens were a close second. And he noted in his article, Mike Florio did, about breaking Michael Vick's record and the big plays that he had. Texans, they were injured. They have injuries. But we all were under the assumption with the narrative, right? We all talked about this. Other people talked about it. If Lamar dominated the Texans on Christmas, he would wrap up the award. That's what happened. You know, we're sticking with that. Lamar, in my opinion, wrapped up the award. And not just me, not just my opinion, that's the case. Lamar's teammates also took to social media after the game, and they made it very clear what their thoughts were on it. We'll talk about that, as well as Lamar Jackson's MVP media haters admitting their mistakes. All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore. I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions. Reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. We're back for our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you on a Victory Thursday edition of the show. As always, thank you so much for being here, tuning in, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every day. I mean it. We really did have fun on that live stream that we did. Of course, we do go live after every single Ravens game. And yesterday, I believe that was the highest viewed live stream in terms of concurrent people in the stream in Locked On Ravens history. We've hit a bunch of milestones here on Locked On Ravens. Our audio form continues to grow every day. We hit 10,000 subscribers in video form a couple Saturdays ago, and we also had our most viewed episode in Locked On Ravens history, 30,000 views, going up on 40,000 now. So can't say enough about this community, especially, you know, during the holidays. You look back, you reflect, and the way that this community's grown over the course of me doing this show. This right here is episode 1,409 consecutively for me, dating back to 2019. That was Lamar's first MVP season, and now he is on the precipice of winning his third. And this is where it kind of gets interesting with the conversation surrounding the MVP, because Lamar goes out there, he dominates the Texans. The week before, he has a great game against the Steelers and pulls even with them. And Josh Allen has a stinker against a 3-11 team. So everybody was saying, okay, wow, 3 weeks to go, 4 weeks to go. The MVP race is over. There's no way. You know, Lamar, the Ravens, they're struggling. They lose to the Eagles, this, that, and the other. Well, now the conversation is completely flipped over on its head. And even Lamar's MVP media haters are now admitting their mistakes. Now, Dan Orlovsky's not a Lamar hater. I want to make that very clear. He has supported Lamar. He has been someone who has been in Lamar's corner. I want to make that clear. But in terms of the MVP, Dan Orlovsky has clearly been on Josh Allen's side. He's made that very clear. You know, this whole CBS arm punt thing, Dan Orlovsky defended that and said, oh, this was a great play, great throw, yada. And arm punts are real, but the way that that was made out, and we talked about that earlier in the week, the way that that play was made out was very much, all right, okay. Let's pump the brakes there. But Dan Orlovsky even talked about it, and he goes, WTH, Lamar, the MVP was over. And he even. And look, we'll have to see what people say during shows and what their opinions are. But for a guy like Orlovsky, who, look, a lot of these guys have votes. And so that's why the Florio thing honestly was a little like, okay, hey, this is something here, because that's coming from guys who have votes. These are coming from guys that have votes. So for Dan Orlovsky, he goes, yeah, WTH. I think he was very certain that even with the Josh Allen thing and even with, Lamar having good games, he could still probably sneak by, say, okay, well, Josh Allen's still the guy. But again, it's like you can't look at what happened on Wednesday and still say either one, Josh Allen is the front runner for the MVP. At the very least, right? You don't have to declare the MVP race over. You don't have to. But at the very least, you have to say Lamar is the front runner. Even RG3, who's been in Lamar's corner the whole time with this MVP conversation, he doesn't believe it's over. He believes Lamar is the front runner. And that's okay. Like, I personally believe it's over, but it was not good to call it over with a month to go in the season. With a week to go in the season, or I guess 2 weeks for the Bills and a lot of the other teams in the league, Lamar having done everything through these first 17 weeks, that to me is, that's the argument you have to kind of tug with here when it comes to Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. Orlovsky also said unbelievable week after week, and that was on the likely play. So Orlovsky was somebody that said, man, okay, MVP was over, but I think he, of course, is reconsidering, as he should. And then you have Emmanuel Acho, who he's been somebody who is literally just this week called Josh Allen more valuable than Lamar Jackson. And he ended up talking about how they need to go back, like everybody needs to go back and look at the losses and evaluate the tape. And as a guy with an MVP, is everybody with MVP votes, essentially. He said, it's irresponsible for any MVP voter to still conclusively say Josh Allen is MVP right now. We got to go rewatch the tape. And he also made it clear, he was the one who put this out. He says, whispers, this Texans team beat Josh Allen's Bills and held Josh Allen to a career low 9 for 30 passing. Lamar Jackson is 9 for 14 with 2 touchdowns, 87 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown today versus Texans in just 3 quarters. And how that actually finished out, just for those who want the actual final stats on Lamar Jackson compared to the final stats on Josh Allen in Ravens Texans. Josh Allen, he went 9 for 30. He had 131 passing yards, 54 rushing yards, 1 total touchdown. They lost that game by 3. Lamar Jackson, 10 for 15, 168 passing yards, 87 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 29-point win. So are the Texans the same team they were in week 5 now? Of course not. They have a couple more injuries, this, that, and the other, but it's not like they didn't have Will Anderson. It's not like they didn't have Danielle Hunter or Derek Stingley or those guys. Christian Harris was back in there. They have dudes on that defense. Now, again, they missed Jalen Petrie a lot. You're dealing with injuries to guys like Jimmy Ward, and you got guys being suspended and all that stuff here, right? I'm not saying that that's not a factor, but to push a narrative, and I'm not saying that any of those guys did this because clearly Emmanuel Acho didn't, but if you're pushing a narrative that, the Texans defense is bad now, that's not true. We went over the stats here on Locked On Ravens earlier, even yesterday. We did a pregame episode, and we talked about the Texans and their defense literally just yesterday. And their defense is actually good. It's good. Even though everybody's talking about, okay, they got all this stuff that's going on. They clearly are a team that, in my opinion, is probably a one and done in the playoffs. I'd be pretty shocked if I think it's going to be Texans Steelers. I'd be pretty shocked if they beat the Steelers, long story short. But this is a defense now that second in the league in pass defense. Coming into this game, they were second in the league in pass defense, 11th in the league in rush defense. That's a good defense. And Lamar Jackson and this Ravens offense made them look bad. Again, season-long story. Got to take context into it. But then you also have Lamar's teammates who absolutely went in for their guy. Absolutely went in for their guy. And that's really cool to me, at least, because, having the back of your team and having the back of your guys, a lot of guys do. But to go out publicly and say it, I'm really glad that they did. You had Zay Flowers Zay Flowers said, MVP, man, stop playing for real, for real. Isaiah Likely saying, are we still debating? Ardarius Washington saying unanimous decision. Derrick Henry after the game with Lamar saying that he deserves it and everything. And Derrick's obviously been in Lamar's corner forever. This whole Ravens team is in Lamar's corner. And this was to a post of the actual MVP candidate stats. It was Lamar Jackson, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Allen. This is, to me, everybody knows it. We had a conversation yesterday about how you can almost compare this a little bit to Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. It's Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, where Jokic deserved the award the year Embiid won it, but people were so tired of voting for Embiid or for Jokic, that Embiid, they just gave it to him. But I think that, again, with Lamar having the stats over Josh Allen, I'm not counting 2 losses. Like 2 in the loss column is not big enough of a loss column difference for me to ignore the rest of the stuff. Joe Burrow, that's a lot of losses, right? If Lamar had that many losses, we wouldn't be talking about him in this conversation. But to me, to the media haters, to Mike Florio, to his teammates, seems like to everybody, Lamar Jackson has clearly pulled away in the MVP conversation. And to me, the race is over. Coming up, though, we have to talk about this Baltimore defense. We really do. Again, a lot of MVP talk, and rightfully so. But this Ravens and Texans game, it was a good one for the Ravens, a great Christmas and holiday gift. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on this episode of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance of $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back. Our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking Ravens football with you on this Victory Thursday. The Ravens beat the Texans 31-2. Baltimore moves in front of Pittsburgh in the AFC North and now controls their AFC North destiny since Pittsburgh lost to the Chiefs on Christmas. So a win against the Cleveland Browns in Week 18, and they win the AFC North. And to me, getting a home playoff game, maybe even more if some upsets happen in the playoffs, will be absolutely massive. Appreciate everybody for being here again today on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to like and subscribe in video form, follow along in audio form as well. And be sure to tell a friend and tell a family member if they're a Ravens fan, if they want 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. I know social media, this is the age of promoting on social media, right? But even word of mouth still today is a really big part of how things grow. So I really appreciate all the support here on the show to continue growing, and hopefully we're gearing up for a very deep playoff run for this Baltimore Ravens team. And the way that they're playing right now, we talked about it with Mike Florio's comment in the first part of the show. I don't know what team beats Baltimore if they're playing like this. And this is where momentum going into the playoffs is such a huge thing. Now, you don't need to have momentum in the playoffs or going into it. Obviously in the playoffs, yes, but going into the playoffs, you don't need to have it. I mean, look at what happened back in 2012 for the Ravens. They were pretty terrible during their final month stretch going into that postseason. They fired Cam Cameron. They bring in a new offensive coordinator pretty late in the year. And then they switch around some personnel and they go on a run and they win the Super Bowl. So it's not required to have this great run before the playoffs begin. But as we talked about this last season with the Ravens during the playoffs. It doesn't matter how you do in the regular season. It doesn't matter if you're the best team in the regular season. It matters if you play your best football when it matters in January, hopefully February. And how you do that is you establish good trends in the regular season. You identify your weaknesses, you correct those, you identify your strengths, you play to those. I feel like Baltimore's done a really good job coming out of the bye week of doing all of that. And in this Ravens and Texans game, I mean, they were dominant really start to finish. I guess there was that moment in the second quarter where you're wondering the Texans could easily be within a point or tie the game after the safety from Derrick Henry, which again, I thought was a poor play call. You don't run draws in your own end zone. I mean, that was bad in its own right. But then Derrick Henry can't cut back in the end zone, despite Derrick Henry being Derrick Henry. I get that he's Derrick Henry. But You can't do that. You can't do it. So that was like the one blemish, I would say. Obviously, the only blemish on the scoreboard, still a Zach Orr shutout. And we have to give Zach Orr a very good round of applause. I'm doing it lightly so my mic won't go crazy on me here, but he deserves a heavy round of applause for his defense and the turnaround that has really happened over the last month and some change now. We know that after that Cincinnati win, they had that closed door open forum meeting. Clearly, there was a lot said in there. They corrected some stuff. They made some personnel changes, and it's worked. I mean, Ardarius Washington has been the unsung hero of this Ravens defense and has another huge play on Joe Mixon where Mixon's trying to get to the end zone, and Ardarius Washington just thumps him out of bounds. That's the second week in a row Ardarius has had a big momentum-changing play like that. And those are the types of winning plays. Ardarius is a winning player. The Ravens have a lot of winning players on their roster. Not every look, no team is there. The Ravens have this thing where they love trusting their young guys. They love watching guys develop, and they like to fill in the cracks. And so for a guy like Ardarius Washington, who has been with the team for a couple of seasons now, he has been around the team. He has been in the culture. He understands what it's like to be a Raven and just be around these guys. To get an opportunity like this and to perform the way that he has, this is exactly what we see for a lot of these players that maybe have to jump in a spot start somewhere, and then they never look back because they just play so well. We've seen plenty of examples with that for the Ravens over the course of their franchise history, and Ardarius Washington, really just the latest example of that. I thought he had a great game. The Ravens had 5 sacks in this game against Houston. The offensive line for Houston really had no answer. Joe Mixon was in a little dust up with Josh Johnson before the game, and he only averaged 2.6 yards per carry, I believe, in this one. Like, the Ravens shut down this Texans offense. It was 2.9, by the way, but the Ravens shut down this Texans offense, and part of that is C.J. Stroud was just awful. This might have been one of the worst games of his career, in my opinion. Was missing throw after throw, had ton of missed opportunities that would have gone for probably big yards, the biggest one being probably Dalton Schultz, where he maybe would have walked into the end zone for a touchdown if CJ actually hit him. CJ was really bad, and I think part of it was the Ravens defense rattled him early, and he could never recover. And on the broadcast, they were talking about, man, just get CJ an easy completion. Just get him an easy completion, and maybe things will get rolling. And it just felt like he could never get that. It was like, okay, he'd complete one pass, so there'd be a nice throw here, and then he'd sail one over Nico Collins' head, or he'd miss Dalton Schultz. There were windows and there were opportunities for CJ, but he was just not hitting on those throws. And look, it's tough when you don't have Tank Dell, you don't have Stephon Diggs, you're kind of working with some new guys in there. I get that. That's tough. But I thought the Ravens defense rattled CJ Stroud pretty good in this game, and that's one of the reasons why he struggled so much in this one. But man, really, Baltimore's defense you got Kyle Van Noy, who has a $3.6 million cap hit this year. He has 11.5 sacks. Adafe always been balling. You get contributions from guys like Nnamdi Madubuike on the D-line, and then other guys as well, like Marlon Humphrey has a great game. Kyle Hamilton has an interception. Trey White getting in on the action. Nate Wiggins, you get contributions from all 3 levels of this defense. You simplify roles, and you prosper. That's exactly what happened here. We talked about Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry's stat lines. Houston defensively just could not stop Derrick Henry whatsoever, and they really didn't. It was a pretty simple game plan. It was, we're going to run Derrick Henry until you can't stop it, and then we're going to mix in the passing game here. The Texans couldn't stop the run game, and so it's like, why would you stop? The Ravens averaged 5.8 yards per carry in this game. Henry himself averaged 5.4, and Lamar obviously had a couple of really big runs. He averaged 21.8, 4 carries, 87 yards, including that long 48-yarder. And then you have Keaton Mitchell getting involved as well. I'd love to see Keaton have a little bit of a bigger role down the stretch here. I know Rasheen Ali left the game. I don't think I saw anything about how he was doing. Hopefully he's okay. But once Justice comes back, I still have belief in that 3-headed monster of Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, and Keaton Mitchell. Keaton had that nice screen pass, and I feel like that's stuff that they can utilize with him down the stretch, especially as just a change of pace option. Him and Justice Hill can be really good change of pace options. Look, this is not at the expense of a Justice Hill. Justice has done nothing to deserve any role being taken away from him. But I think as the third back, I would probably choose Keaton over Rasheen. I feel like Baltimore maybe values Rasheen's special teams ability a little more over Keaton, and that might be what's going on here. But I think Keaton does deserve an opportunity. Not really a lot to report pass catcher-wise. I mean, Mark Andrews 2 for 68 and a touchdown. Zay Flowers 2 for 31. Lamar didn't really need to throw the ball that often, but when he did, he was effective. He missed a couple of throws here and there, but again, I thought it was a pretty efficient game overall from Lamar. So, man, what a win for the Ravens. Seriously. I mean, this to me was the most dominant win of the season for the Ravens. I know this wasn't the most amount of points they put up, but a shutout defensively, you give up just a safety in the game. This felt like a complete team win. Offensively, defensively, special teams. Usually it feels like there's one unit in Baltimore, and we talked about this yesterday. It usually feels like there's one or two units that just don't play up to standard, and then one unit has to kind of carry those other two units, or two units have to make up for one unit's mistakes. This just felt like all three units were so good together. They were all so dominant, and that was a big reason why this win felt so dominant, is because every aspect of the game was incredible. Even I think Baltimore's coaching staff outcoached Houston's. Everybody was balling out in this game, and that's one of the reasons why I think Baltimore won this game so handily. Also, interestingly enough, Deontay Johnson not active for this game. He was on the Texans sideline, but after the game, there were interactions between him and his former Ravens teammates, and they were all jumping around, laughing, having fun. So a lot of people were very confused by that. I don't know if Deontay will talk with the Houston media about any of that. If he does, we will talk about it here on Locked On Ravens, but very interesting. And again, it's like we cannot rid ourselves of this Deontay Johnson saga. So obviously we're not going to make a whole show out of that, but I thought it was interesting, the interaction that happened between Deontay and his former Ravens teammates. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. On the way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along and subscribe in audio form as well, 4 or 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be back here talking what the latest is about Lamar Jackson MVP conversation, the latest on what the happenings are with the Baltimore Ravens, of course. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.